Good morning. This is meteorologist Ted Keller with severe weather outlooks for today. I haven't been doing a video for a while because, quite frankly, it's been very quiet. And the reason why it's been quiet is we have a pattern in the upper atmosphere. This is the 500 millibar chart forecast for later today. And they called it omega block because it resembles the Greek letter omega, just like that. Okay, a little crooked, but you get the idea. Basically, in the atmosphere, what happens here is this is a stagnant weather pattern where this ridge of high pressure here gets stuck between two areas of low pressure. Sometimes they're cut off lows like this one. Sometimes it's just a trough, although both of these are cut off. So this pattern doesn't really allow there to be movement. In other words, a lot of times we see a wave that will come ashore in the western U.S. and will progress. In other words, it'll dive into the southwest and then come out into the plains. And how often does that cause severe weather? In this case, though, this is stagnant because the two are kind of the three objects are in opposition to each other, basically, and there is not a lot of movement. Now, eventually these break down, and I think there are some signs that this will break down as we get deeper into June, opening up the floodgates again for severe weather possibilities. But for right now, today, it's still stuck. That's not to say that we can't get severe weather, however. And really, a lot of it depends on the ability of moisture, read instability to come up from the Gulf and get into the United States in any substantial way. So it does get caught up in the south very often because a frontal system will stall there, for example. And so you see evidence of that in the instability this afternoon in Texas, kind of creeping up the front range of the Rockies. Interestingly, though, right around Washington, Oregon, and Idaho, they have a severe weather threat today. So let's get to that. Here's the Storm Prediction Center's severe weather risk for today. And you can see a level 2 out of 5. Forgot to put the numbers on it. But basically, east of the Cascades, where the temperatures can get pretty warm. And it's interesting because the upper level winds will actually be out of this direction. So kind of an interesting spiral there. But it's all relative. You just have to spin it in your mind to see if there's good, good upper level wind profiles to produce severe weather, and they are. It's just not what you're used to seeing. There's also a little wave there of marginal risk right around Denver and down to Colorado Springs. There is a tornado risk with this up in the northwest, so it's extreme southern Washington into parts of Oregon, including Bend and over into Lewiston, Idaho. There is a 2% risk of a tornado within a 25-mile radius. And if we look at NATOcast, it kind of agrees with that assessment and puts it up to about 3% there in parts of Oregon. And curiously, a little strip there of 2% in Kansas, northeast of Wichita. That there's just a persistent rain pattern, as you know, if you live in the Ozarks, it's coming up from the southeast here. And along the edge of that, where the instability has been allowed to build to its greatest, that's where we have a slight possibility there in Kansas today. I did want to go back into the northwest, though. Of the three possible severe weather parameters, the next one on the list for them would be hail. Cold air aloft, very unstable air down below, a good recipe for hail. And NATOcast's hail product agrees with that, where they're putting a 30% chance of a severe hailstone there right around Lewiston. And that hatched area right there in black is a 10% chance of it being 2-inch greater or diameter or greater of hail. The severe is 1 inch, so that's a little bit of an up in severity, both in intensity and risk in that area today. Kind of interesting. Also around Denver, too. There's a little bit of hail risk. Then we go to Friday, just kind of patched together here. There may be one or more of these that get upgraded to a slight risk, in my opinion. Most likely this one, but this one, too. In fact, all three could. They'll just, the Storm Prediction Center forecasters will just wait for more data to make up their mind about that. On Friday, though, the overall CSU storm risk is limited, really. Nothing in the 15% risk category. A little bit of a tornado risk there, of all places, in western Montana. Not really showing up very predominantly. Now, over the weekend, Saturday in particular, I find this interesting. This has been here all along as a threat from western Nebraska into South Dakota. If anything, it's expanded northward a little bit, 2 out of 5 risk. But this is really taking shape. This was not really part of the equation before. This level 1 area that extends down through central Kansas, covering much of Oklahoma, even into Texas. I'm watching this area interesting. As you know, I chase storms, but I do so to a certain extent, opportunistically. So in other words, I'd have to be really convinced to go up here to South Dakota. It would have to be a pretty good risk for a tornado. So, but I'm looking at some of the soundings there and the instability, and while I don't think it'll be widespread, if it's very conditional, if thunderstorm were to form in that area, could get a tornado that would only be a 3 or 4 hour drive away. So we'll see what happens with that. On CSU, though, they do not put any tornado risk in that area I was just talking about, but they definitely do put it where the SPC puts it and extend it a little bit more into Kansas, with probably hail being the second highest actually the first highest risk probability for a thunderstorm, with tornadoes being second. If we take a look at the upper level pattern on Saturday, you'll see what's happening here. We still have kind of an omega block, so you still have this ridge of high pressure in Canada, but this short wave is undercutting the ridge, kind of breaking down the pattern a little bit. So it's broken into two. Dynamically speaking, it's probably best up here. That's why the SPC put the outlook where they did. But we're also seeing some indication that the bulk shear with this 500 millibar flow, this is the subtropical jet right here, could be good enough in this area to actually support a supercell, which would be the first thing. The second thing would be, is it unstable enough? Yes, on Saturday it's unstable enough, as you can see by the NAM forecast for that period. And if we take a look at tornado risk for Saturday, and this has been a very consistent feature for days now this week, of putting a bullseye for that right around North Platte to McCook down there in not really the panhandle of Nebraska, I guess more of southwest Nebraska. But this does extend more into Kansas every time I look at it. So, yeah, just kind of wondering how much Kansas and even northern Oklahoma might eventually be affected by this. We are looking now at the CSU product for Sunday. Now moving ahead one day, kind of a broad brush area, severe weather from the Dakotas down into Kansas, a little bit of Texas. As far as tornadoes on Sunday, that risk area moves from here to here in a day's time. And then finally, the NIU product. This sums up the next week. A lot of front range activity, as you already saw. A little arm there, though, of some of the things I was talking about. And then, again, and overall, this has always been a front range Rockies, maybe a Central Plains increase in severe weather possibility. So you see the reds indicating the highest probability of a supercell. Again, this is not any particular day. This is accumulated over a week's time, but it does show kind of an eyeball of what's to be expected. And the week floats. These are all like, this is not a set Monday through Sunday forecast, but every time I show you this, it begins today, and then the next 7 days, and then the next 7 days. And then finally, having said that, I wanted to show you June 11th through the 17th. This has moved around a lot. The other day I saw it up here, but it is consistently showing up more as a higher supercell threat. So it does look like maybe after we get about a week into June or so and beyond, that the severe weather possibilities might be going up.